This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Body Count, a history podcast where we gab about death and disaster through the ages, highlighting figures, single events, time periods, whatever that result in someone, or as is usually the case, a lot of someone's dying. Now, I am your host, Jessica Manor, joined as always by my co-hostesses. Well, that's a mouthful.
Oh, we've been promoted, man.
I know.
Hostesses.
I'm Bethany Skelton.
And I am Kara DiDemizio. A little bit more chipper tonight. What do you think?
You brought some pep to that, and I'm loving it. I love
That
the
5
energy.
hours
I love the
does
feeling.
Well, that it does well for me. That's what I can say. And we are joined by a pretty cool guest, and I will give it to you folks. I think we can all agree here. She has her shit put together at a very responsible age.
Yeah, I'll say.
I'll put it out there, guys. You're going to be impressed by what she's bringing to the table. And I'm going to allow you to go ahead and introduce yourself. And then I also want you to promote your links. So where you can be found, social media, where you can read your content, all that pizzazz.
All right. So I am Autumn Hendrickson. I am currently a freshman in college, and I've been doing a lot of research that we'll get to. I am also from a relatively small town in Massachusetts called Reading that people like to pronounce Reading because they think it's funny. It's not. If I hear one more, it's the reading library joke, I might cry.
But
But
hey, Autumn, can I ask you, what about the Reading Rainbow? What about the Reading Rainbow? What about the Reading Rainbow? I'm sorry, I had to.
the Reading, no, I mean, okay, I guess it's okay. The Reading Rainbow was pretty cool. No, so my if you want to read some of the articles that I've been writing, that we'll get to talking about exactly what they are, but they're roughly about the World War II veterans from my town. You can find me at thereadingpost.com, and if you want to go directly to my page, you can just go /author/A Hendrickson, and that should take you to my profile on their website. If you want to keep up with me on Twitter, I'm at __autumnleaf__. And if you'd like to support my my article writing and my work for my book, you can find me on Facebook at Reading's Boys, and that is a name that is a work in progress since we've got quite a lot of gals from Reading too. It's just what I'm best known for, so I'm keeping it that way to get the word out, and then I'll probably switch it. But for now, that's where you can find me.
That is so cool. Who has articles posted on a website as a freshman in college? Not me.
That's what I was going to say. I was like waking up and people I barely knew. It's like futon.
Literally, just her and Peter Lanning, which I'll have to put you in touch with because he's really cool. If he's listening, he does some Wisconsin stuff, but a lot of regional focus. So we'll have to definitely get you two talking. But no, I agree with Bethany. Gosh dang. Very motivated, and especially because I have to say too, I think we can all acknowledge how fucked up 2020 is, and you're going through it just motivated, which I have even more respect for, because I had thought several times last year, can you imagine being an undergraduate studying history with so many resources, probably limited, or at least a little bit more limited given the circumstance. So I want to dive into this after you promoted your material here, obviously. I want to ask you, what got you interested in doing what you're doing, especially with you being so young? And this is not an ageist thing. I have tremendous respect, and we're not that far off in age. But what piqued your interest?
Maybe not you, Kara. Maybe not you.
I mean, so for me, so for some perspective, for example, I was born a little over a month after 9/11. My adoptive father, my uncle, was a veteran of the Gulf War or not the Gulf War, I'm sorry, the Iraq War. That's all I really knew of war. Like I didn't, my adoptive grandpa was in World War II, but I didn't really know about that at all. So for the most part, my family, as far as I knew, was completely spared from war. Well, when I got to high school, the year between, I think it was my eighth grade and freshman year, or freshman and sophomore years. I'm not exactly sure. It was one of those summers. My mom's took me on a vacation to Nova Scotia. And I had been doing all this genealogy research in the lead up to this because we were going to visit. They said, I don't know why they said this because it was so stupid, that we could visit the town that my family came from, which is this tiny little town where the restaurants literally open at 3 and close promptly at 7. Like, it is so small. And the best thing is if you go there and you say my last name, like the last name that I've had for generations, even though I don't have it, it's not part of my legal name, they're like, oh yeah, like that's how small this town is. It's called Pictou. Yeah, Pictou, Nova Scotia, up in the northern corner. And I went there. And I went to the cemetery where my 4th great grandfather was buried. And I got to dig my knees into the dirt in front of his headstone. And that was crazy. Like for me, like he was born in 1800. He came to Nova Scotia at the age of 4 from Scotland. And he lived there and worked there, had all his children there. And he died in 1885. According to a local, paper, he was the, kind of jolly old Santa type of guy. He was a horrible farmer. He was a shoemaker, and he always had these cows, but his field looked horrible, and everyone always laughed at him because his field was, just not great at all. But he was the guy who you'd go to if you needed new shoes. And he was a big part of the community. And, you walk up through that cemetery, you walk through all the shiny new headstones, you get up to the part where they're cracking, falling in half, and there his obelisk is, William Keeler MacDonald, standing there. And it was amazing.
What a name.
I know, right? And then he named his sons that too, bruh. I don't know. It's okay. But I'm over it. I'm good. But that was
Autumn.
Yeah, right. But that was a really amazing experience. And then in my junior year, I started to explore my biological dad's side of my tree, which I'd never explored before. And I came across this man. He was my first cousin 4 times removed, and he had really weird dates for his life. He was born in 1878 and died in 1918. And I was like, I know World War I ended in 1918, but he was in the Navy. World War I was not a naval war. That wasn't even, America didn't even really participate in the war enough to see any naval combat. And I looked into it and it said he died of pneumonia. And then I learned about the Spanish flu pandemic. And he died on October 11th. 1918, 1 month before the war would end. Aww. And his wife had just had their only daughter, their only child. The letter that she sent to him to tell him, it made it to the boat, but it made it to his bed 2 hours after he died. And it was marked as undeliverable. Yeah. And that broke my heart. And I was like, geez. And so to honor him, I was like, geez, I gotta learn more about this and what happened. And I ended up learning that my great uncle was killed at the Battle of Montserrat in 1916. And I started to realize my family did our bloodletting in World War I. We just missed World War II. And yeah.
Our time. In our time for World War I. We're going to skip the next one.
I'm good. Yeah, thanks, guys. But, I'm all right. And my great uncle's name was Carrie Judson Tupper, and the thing that really, really broke my heart is that his brother, who had, he lost his younger brother in a war. He comes to America. He comes to Boston, Massachusetts, he names one of his sons, Carrie Judson Tupper. The kid dies at the age of 8 of measles.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's some bad. That's not good.
Yeah, some bad luck. I mean, it's
interesting though.
So for me, that was like, I was interested in this stuff. So I get to high school, and I have the opportunity in my senior year to take a history class, an elective. And so I picked World War II European theater because I was like, this seems more interesting than, like history of epidemic diseases. Like, I don't want to learn about the plague, okay? I already spent like 2 years on it in middle school. Like, I'm good, thank you. And so I took this class, and I'll be honest, as much as I loved the teacher, I didn't really retain a lot of the information. So I went on after the class, and I knew more. I just didn't retain a whole lot. And so I basically got this job offer a few months after that after that class had ended, from my local newspaper, offering to, if I wanted to write for them over the summer. And I was like, sure, but COVID. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write about. Like, what do you want?
What a unique situation. What a unique situation.
No.
Like, in a historical context, Jessica, is this the first time that we've talked to somebody? And like, when they started doing their research on it, guess what's become a real problem?
Yeah.
The pandemic and accessibility. And I think what is really striking to me is I think you capture a very unique perspective in the historical narrative, right? And you almost have that connection with 100 years ago, right? I think the Spanish flu has come up how many times, right? With parallels. And having that family connection too, that's neat. Good for you. I'm man.
Well, so basically what happened was I was like, all right, I'll take this job, and I was like sitting there stewing, like, what the hell am I gonna write about? And I, this was sparked by my class that I'd taken, on, World War II European theater. I was like, and I said this to myself, it's one of those things that you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to do this, but you're not going to do it. Like, you just think it's a cool idea. And I told people, oh, maybe I'll write about like the guys from Reading, in World War II or something, like during the summer of 44, because I'm not stupid. I know D-Day. And so that's a really interesting topic. That's what most people know about World War II. They know June 6th, 1940 something. That's like what they know, like June 6th, 1940 something. So I was like, well,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, so people might be interested. So I told myself, I'm not going to find anything on these guys, but I will sit down and I will go on Ancestry and look up draft cards that were sorted and filed for Reading, Massachusetts, and I will sit there with Goldfish and Ken Burns' documentary, The War, and I will just look, and I won't find anything, so then I won't find anything, and it'll be done, and I'll find something else to write about. And I found
to be fair, anything that you're doing when you've got Ken Burns on is already going to sound more fascinating to you.
Exactly.
Because it's Ken Burns.
Yeah, duh.
I would, not that I don't love Ken Burns, but, about the third hour of jazz, Ken Burns is, I don't know, history of jazz or whatever. You're going, all right, enough's enough, man. Wrap it up.
Wrap it up, dude. Yeah, so that's the long-winded answer.
Starts out good. Nah, but
we like long answers.
No,
well,
it's just that's a good explanation though, because I feel like without that context, you jump from X, Y, and Z, because I still want to know how somebody your age is this fucking motivated.
That's it's blowing my mind. It's blowing my mind.
My language,
after 9/11, I about cried.
Right? I threw up in my mouth.
No, I realized that when she said that, I admit that wow, good grief, I really flattered myself. I was like 5.
I was like, oh, cool. I was a freshman in high school, so
Yeah.
awesome.
your life. That's where I was.
I was like, oh my God, like,
Do you,
oh,
do you think that like going to college, like when you're doing like what you're doing now, I guess, like doing the research you're doing on them, do you think that the pandemic, I guess, has motivated you for searching for answers on this stuff? Like, because in a weird way, you're kind of removed, right? I'm not sure what the campus situation is for you, but you're almost removed from that normal collegiate experience the rest of us had.
I mean, we did do a little bit of in-person time at my college. I do think that for me initially that was my motivation, but for me once I started to like learn about these men and women, it was like I was doing it for them. Like and I know that's like really a corny thing to say, but I really like mean it. Like it's like I was at first, I was doing it because I was like, I need to write something. I've just gotten this job. Like, all right, I have this pandemic to work with. So people are going to be more interested in content that has nothing to do with what's going on in their lives because they're trying to pretend the world doesn't exist. So, why not take them on a time machine? And so yeah, exactly. So I basically, I think that it started from the pandemic. Yeah, it's morphed into something else entirely.
Can I say really quickly, it's not corny because I'm doing it for them. Even got a half smile out of me, like the Grinch's heart has grown 3 sizes this day. Okay, so even I was like, oh, you got me, Autumn. You got me.
But yeah.
I do have a heart. I love the Who's down in Whoville, the tall and the small.
It's a little bit.
It's there. Well, I'm actually excited to learn about all these men that you have done the research on. I've been kind of scrolling through your
I know you are, Bethany. I know you are.
Yeah.
Love you. Okay.
Yeah, so let's launch into it. Let's get it started. I'm ready to hear. With my Grinch heart ready to receive.
All right. So I'll go ahead and I'll just start off with the first guy I have here. So that would be Walter Joseph Duchette, or Doucette. I've learned that I think it's Doucette, but I've been saying Duchette for so long. I apologize. I say it with love every time. He was a member of the 22nd Bomb Squadron, 341st Bomb Group. Now, Walter is like a Reading boy through and through. All these guys are. In my book and my articles, I do include men who moved here after the war, but since these men died in the war, all of these men would have had to have been from Reading or had some really strong connection. But Walter was born in 1920, and he enlisted, he did not enlist, excuse me, he was drafted into the United States Army in June of 1942. Now, it's not, I don't know, because this man's long since passed away. I don't know, where he went or how he ended up with the unit that he ended up with. But the 22nd Bomb Squadron of the 341st Bomb Group was sent to the Pacific. And I believe they flew B-24s or B-17s. I'm honestly not sure off the top of my head. Not that the average person would really know the difference because they're not that different. But either way, Walter was a staff sergeant, and he was a gunner, I believe. I have here, he's probably a waist gunner, which means that he would stand in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the fuselage of the plane, and he would have like a window to shoot out from. And so he would track targets with his weapon. And this is a 50 caliber machine gun. So this is a big boy. And usually there were 2 waist gunners. There's one guy covering the back side, the left side or something, then someone's covering the right. And so Walter would ultimately be killed on February 15th, 1944, a day after Valentine's Day. And basically what had happened there was, and this is funny because some people are going to recognize this, I'm sure of it. He was tasked with flying a mission over the Gulf of Tonkin, which, as I think we all know, was quite a important geographic feature in the coming years. A lot of people, right?
Foreshadowing.
I know, and a lot of people don't know that was a thing. Like the CBI, China, Burma, India, like theater of war. That was a whole thing. We had bombers flying missions into China and India and stuff. So basically, what had happened here was the plan for these planes. I think there were about 13 planes that went off. I'll probably know in a few minutes if I'm right about that. The plan for the mission was to sweep over the Gulf, like come in low, and search for any targets, so like ships, anything like that, drop their bombs if they found one, and then continue going inland to bomb some bridges in the area with whatever bombs they had left. But the weather was really bad. It was very foggy and windy, and so during all the chaos, Walter's plane got separated from the other planes that they were flying with. And obviously the assumption then was that the crew was lost, because the plane didn't come back to its base. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that the plane ended up ultimately crashing, they actually managed to damage the bridge that they were trying to damage in Do Len before they crashed, which is quite amazing if you think about it. But the crashed plane was actually found by French authorities. So this is in French Indochina. That's Vietnam, like this was controlled by the French. And so they actually found the plane, and they explained in a message that was sent to the Americans on February 26, 1944, they'd found this plane, and they explained that the entire crew had been killed, because they found 10 bodies, and that's how many men were assigned to these planes. In the message, the French explained that the entire crew had been killed and had been buried by the people that found the plane originally. They don't indicate if those were people from the surrounding village or if they were just the authorities. Like, it doesn't indicate that. But they were buried by those people, which is, obviously it makes sense. You want to bury a body for various reasons, but it's kind of amazing that they did that. And unfortunately, and I think this is really sad, because, messages took time to get from point A to point B back then. The message of Walter's disappearance didn't reach his family until February 25th of 1944, and he was reported missing in action. Now, if you'll recall, the French confirmed to the Americans that all these men had died the next day. But that information was not going to be made available to them right away because it's not going to get there in time. So basically what happened was his status was finally updated to killed in action, and his family was informed sometime around March 2nd. And I say sometime because that's when it was reported in the Boston Globe. So it's likely that they had that information maybe for a day or something before it reached the newspaper, but it's also possible it was that same day. And actually today you can find him in the military cemetery in Honolulu. That's where his marker is. So he was, it was very sad learning about him, but quite amazing that they were still able to get that bridge destroyed. Despite, and it's unclear what caused them to go down, by the way. Like, we don't know if there was anti-aircraft fire, if it was an enemy plane, if there was an engine failure.
Technical issue.
Yeah, it's completely unknown what happened to them, which I think is even sadder in some ways. But yeah, so that's Walter. He lived at, I can find here, Walter lived at 18 Minnow Street, Reading, Massachusetts, and that is where his family was when they got the news.
I love that you have this address.
I have the addresses for all of them. Some of them I've even memorized. I know, weird. I can't memorize a math formula, but I can tell you where Walter Joseph Duchette lived. Yeah, so.
Well, we know where to go to when we need some info, right?
All right. Should I go on to the next guy?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Please.
So,
I was like, oh, cool. Walter took out a bridge. Oh, Walter died.
yeah. Poor Walter. Rip.
Bethany, let me go ahead and spoiler alert this for you. I don't think any of these are going to have happy endings.
Yeah. I mean, Walter kind of does have a slightly happy ending, but we'll get there when we get there.
Had a big ass gun and he was.
I mean, I gotta say, like, one of the things that's like lucky about this next guy is that he definitely didn't know he was dying, which makes me feel a lot better. But this story really, really broke my heart when I found out about it. The story of Arthur Merritt Lenfest. Now, I've seen his name spelled Lenfast, but I've seen it Lenfest more, so I'm assuming that's the name. That's also the name on the headstone. But I mean, stuff like this, people make mistakes like this all the time. Now, this man was in the infamous position on his B-17 of the ball turret. The ball turret gunner. So on B-17s, they have this turret that goes down beneath the plane, and it has 365 degrees of view. You have pedals, and you can turn yourself as you go. And you're like curled up in the fetal position when you're in there, and you're in there for like 8 hours. That's how small that thing is. One of the reasons why, yeah, I know, right?
I used to have a picture. Sorry, feedback. Are we good?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, sorry, I heard feedback for a moment. Sorry, Mark. Hold on. We'll do it 3, 2, 1.
You good? Oh.
Ah, Kara.
What?
Okay. No, what I was going to say really quickly. So I worked in an aviation museum. That's the last thing I did in Georgia, and we rebuilt one of these planes with this exact thing you're talking about. And if what I think is about to happen to this man is about to happen, this is like fucking horrific, guys. It's terrible.
I promise you it's not, but it's kind of worse.
Cut out.
In its own way. But yeah, I think what you're thinking, Jessica, is the exact thing that I will explain that's infamous about the ball turret gunner. In case you don't know, so the ball turret gunner obviously sits below the plane. So should the plane have to make an emergency belly landing, the ball turret gunner gets sacrificed in that landing if he cannot pull himself up. Especially, and this is very common because usually if a plane has to make a belly landing, there's a lot of shit wrong. And so the engine that powers the thing to bring the ball turret gun up probably isn't working, which means he's going to try to crank it from inside if he can. He'll try. I mean, they usually, some of them would just, say their prayers and, let it happen, but they were going to die. There was no way they were going to live. They were sacrificed in the process of their crew surviving. It was something that often ate at these men when they had to make belly landings, knowing that someone was sitting there in the ball turret. Yeah, it's very horrible. One thing, though, that's kind of interesting is that, surprisingly, they had very high survival statistics during the war. It's just they had the most gruesome ways to die. Now, Arthur, it's unclear to me if the way that he died, like in the nature of what he died, was like actually his first mission up in a B-17. I don't really know. He was in Europe though, and I hate to say it, he was only 21 years old when he left this planet. He was born in 1923. But on January 4th, 1944, one way or another, Arthur Lenfest boarded the B-17 that he would die on.
Wait, was that 7 years ago yesterday?
Yeah. More than 70, but yeah. Very sad. But as I said, I don't believe it was Arthur's first mission, but it's entirely possible that it was his first combat mission. One thing that's interesting to note about this guy is that he actually just did not want to die. He had actually been involved in a crash after a training flight in late December of 43 that he had survived. So it's possible that this was his first combat mission, though. And they were headed from England to Kiel, so he was in the ETO, European Theater of Operations. To be more specific, for any of you wondering, 351st Bombardment Squadron, 100th Bombardment Group. Either way, Arthur was the ball turret gunner, and he died of hypoxia because the crew forgot to check in with him to make sure his oxygen mask was working.
What the?
Yeah, I know. They were supposed to check in every 8 minutes. That was the protocol. Every 8 minutes they checked in. And they didn't, I guess they didn't check in with him. And he died. And it's very sad. I mean, it broke my heart when I heard about it. I mean, yeah, but you gotta think too, like, at first I was mad too. You gotta think how that would have fucked with that crew. Those guys probably never forgot about Arthur Merritt Lenfest for the rest of their damn lives. I mean, the kid that they killed in their ball turret. I mean, I'm sure that stuck with them. His family was ultimately notified of his death in late January of 44. But you think, he survived Christmas, he survived New Year's, and then just couldn't make it any farther. It was his time to go. Pretty much. But very, very sad. Let me get the next guy here. Yeah, that one always breaks my heart every time I think about it. Not as much
all
as
the things,
but
all the things to die of in that war. That's not. No.
Yeah, that's not the one. Yeah, that's not the one. I mean, and that's why I said, though, the nice thing about this is that he almost certainly didn't know he was dying. That's the thing about hypoxia. You don't notice. You kind of just float off as you lose oxygen. And so, I mean, I can't decide if that makes me, feel better or worse. But, I mean, there is that part of it. Like, for him, it was probably better. For me, I don't know. But for him, it was almost certainly better that he didn't know he was dying. He just died.
He can be panicking and you're just like, oh, I'm kind of sleepy now.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. Actually, they called it. They had a name for it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the Air Corps, they had a name for it. I think they called it a flight mania or something. Like they would get all crazy, and that's how they knew that someone was low on oxygen, because the guy would be like, "Hey man, what's up? This is awesome!" oh, did you see we're flying a plane? There are plenty of instances of this happening. So they did have a name for it. It did happen.
Oh my god!
But usually you didn't die from it. Unfortunately, this kid pulled the bad end of the straw, but
it's not funny. I'm sorry.
No, I get you. I mean, it is amusing to think, of all the things, buddy, poor kid. But
yeah, it's kind of it's I guess someone always has to die the unfortunate way, right? We think of heroic deaths, and we think of the first one you discussed, right, where they managed to also, I guess, in a way, do their mission. But that's not how it goes. I mean, I think like Autumn said, I think sometimes it's just your time, and it might be a fucked up time. It might not be the prettiest way to go, as we've discussed on the show. That's sad though. That's 21,
only 2 years old.
Fetal position, just in the fetal position, hanging out, losing oxygen.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess if I had to die, I would like to be in the fetal position. Maybe that would be comforting. I don't know. Either way, since I'm doing this, Arthur lived at 8 Copeland Avenue, Reading, Massachusetts.
Yes.
So here is our. Here, let me. Shall I continue?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Bethany. So the next guy that we have is also rather sad, but it is a very interesting story. Benjamin Howe Jr. of the 561st Bombardment Squadron, 388th Bombardment Group. Now, I actually don't know when he ended up joining the Army. I couldn't find an enlistment record. Part of the reason why this is probably because he ended up as an officer, and sometimes men like that didn't even enlist. Like, they didn't go through the enlistment process. They literally just jumped right to being an officer, and thus they don't have an enlistment record. But either way, he was a pilot. And someone actually wrote their thesis about one of the men from Benjamin's crew, because they all didn't make it. At least, or I'm pretty sure maybe one of them. I think one of them lived. Maybe it was one or two. I'm not sure, but either way, someone wrote about it, and the thesis is called "Finding Stephen," a lost bomber crewman, and Benjamin they talk about him a little bit in that thesis, and unfortunately, because my library won't allow me access to our old issues of the Reading Chronicle, I can't really look into it a whole lot more right now. But Benjamin Howe Jr. was killed in action on August 19th, 1943 over the Netherlands. He was on his fourth mission. He had been through a fair bit with his crew at this point. They'd been through a lot in just those 4 missions. But basically what happened, Benjamin did everything right. I'll tell you that right now. He did everything right. There was like nothing that he did in this. He did everything by the book, what he was supposed to have done. They got beat up really bad by German flak. Flak is just anti-aircraft fire. What it does is it's not supposed to hit you, like it doesn't smack you. It's supposed to envelop you in shrapnel. That's why flak works, because it's really hard to hit a plane 20,000 feet above. It's a lot easier to shower the plane, to kind of hit it. And so that's why it's called flak. It's different from, your average, artillery piece or whatnot, stuff like that. So they got beat up really bad, and his B-17 couldn't keep up with the rest of the formation as they returned after their bombing run. So the way it works, one of the reasons why planes really got fucked up on their bombing run was because they would come in and they had to stay in a straight line. Because if they moved at all, then the bombing run would be off. The bombs wouldn't land where they were supposed to land, because from 20,000 feet, you got to be really fucking accurate. What would happen is the pilot would give control over to the navigator, not the navigator, the bombardier. The bombardier is the guy who, says bombs away and pulls the lever and the bombs fall. So he gets to control. Yeah, right. He gets to control the little fine adjustments and everything as they go in. So while this is going on, they're basically all screaming, "Get us the fuck out of here!" Like, that's what happened, because they're like, "Drop the fucking bombs!" Like, they're all screaming at this point. Because it's like they have to fly in a straight line. They know that. They just want the bombardier to drop the bombs and get them out. And so this probably happened to them while they were on their bombing run. So they're coming back out with their formation. And Benjamin had to drop out of the formation. It is very dangerous to drop out of the formation. It is strength in numbers in that formation. That's how they make the formation. They make it so that if one German fighter comes down the middle, all the other waist gunners can open fire on that thing as it goes in to make its run on an enemy bomber, or in our case, a friendly bomber. So it's very, very dangerous to drop out of a formation like that. And there were fires all over the plane, and the crew were going to try to manage the fires, and German fighters started closing in. And Benjamin knew that the plane was not going to make it.
Those dicks.
Right, yeah. Fucking Krauts.
Nazis.
Oh, shit. Well, during that war, that's not inaccurate.
Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
That's what they called them. That's just what they called them. Benjamin knew that the plane was not going to make it, and he rang the bailout bell. The bailout bell is very similar to the dive bell on a submarine. It's very loud. It's like big beep, beep, beep. The problem is it comes over the intercom, because usually you can't hear shit over the drone of the engines, because the engines, there's 4 engines on a B-17. They're freaking massive. And prop engines are also much louder than jet engines too. So if you think jet engines are loud, you have no idea. So some of the crew wasn't able to hear him. when he rang the bailout bell. And only 2 men were actually able to bail out of the plane. And the same way that captains go down with their ship, pilots are supposed to hold their plane steady so that the crew can actually safely parachute out without risking getting caught in one of the rotors or something. So
That's
Benjamin,
interesting. I did not know that.
yeah, this is very important. And so Benjamin stayed on board to hold the plane steady so that the guys could get out. The 2 men that made it out of the plane here, did get captured and lived. The other 8 men, Benjamin included, plummeted to the ground and died. And according to the Boston Globe, Benjamin's parents had received a letter from him dated the day before he was missing in action. Yeah. And of course, this status would later be updated to killed in action. And he left behind a wife and a 3-year-old daughter. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very sad.
His address?
His address was, here we go, 39 Howard Street. Very sad place to be in 1943, I imagine. But
Autumn, I like that you made my heart grow, and now you're steadily chipping away at it.
That's
Which is real.
It's like a torture.
It's
like a slow, steady, like torturing Jessica. We give her a heart, and then we're just gonna like break it back.
Away, yeah.
You don't deserve one, Jessica.
I feel like I'm being gaslighted on my own show.
Oof. So our next guy, this is honestly a lot shorter than some of these other ones. But I thought this was worth putting in here. Now, to be clear, these are not all the guys from Reading that died. There are 24 men from Reading that died, and 2 of the men I have on this list are not counted in that 24. So, either way. This man, I feel like he was important because he had been a teacher at Reading High School. I believe he taught English. I'm not exactly sure. But Henry Gurney Ingersoll was his name. He was a naval aviator. Because it was so early in the war, he hadn't actually really been assigned like a solid unit that I could tell you. So all I can tell you is he was a naval aviator. And on December 18th of 1942, a little over a year after we'd entered the war, Henry's aircraft capsized off the coast of Alaska, and he died of exposure. He froze to death. Henry had been a teacher, obviously, as I said, at Reading High before the war. And one of the things that this really, I think maybe most people don't know about, is the Aleutian Island campaign, in which the Japanese actually took two of the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. And so technically speaking, the Japanese invaded the United States. So this man was stationed there as part of one of the big buildups that we had. This ties in very closely to the Battle of Midway, because the Japanese sent out messages that tried to trick us into thinking that they were going to go to the Aleutian Islands when they were in reality going to Midway. We had already broken some of their codes, so we knew it was a trick. But just in case, because we did not want the propaganda nightmare that would be a Japanese soldier setting foot on American soil, we sent like an entire division of infantry and some naval aviators, some general support that you would give to an area that probably won't be attacked but could be, to the Aleutian Islands. And so that is probably the nature of Henry's assignment, like what it was when he died. And you got to think, this was December. It was freezing in Alaska. Like, it was absolutely freezing. So very, very sad story for him. And Henry was also very young to be a teacher, by the way. He was only born in 1917. So he must have only really taught there for a few years. But he lived at 3 Mount Vernon Street in Reading, Massachusetts. So.
I love this.
I'm so for the addresses right now.
But you know what? It humanizes it though, right? Like, I feel like so often, like the stories we hear about in like movies or TV shows, it's even Band of Brothers, which I know is a fantastic show, don't get me wrong, and they do a lot to personify with the interviews. But I think there's even kind of this this personality cult, right? Where you get so attracted to what you see in media that you lose sight of the fact that this is a human person with like emotions, with family, and the impact that would have had on Reading, Massachusetts, in that area. It is massive. And no, I just, like you said, I really think knowing the address and having that picture of this was a person is that extra gravitas at, I think, death. Because sometimes we become so desensitized, especially when we talk war, when we talk body counts in, let's say, World War I, World War II, but especially military conflict, right? It's like sometimes we freak the fuck out if it's a commander or if it's a big time leader. But then when we talk about like the little guy, so to speak, the small fry that's actually doing the work, then it's like we lose sight of that. And I don't know. For me, it's just like it teaches me something. I'll put it that way. Like to me.
Yeah. And I feel like this one in particular, Henry, like it just kind of sucks because it seems like he was just on a precautionary mission. Like it was just, oh, well, we're just going to send you there just in case, but there's nothing going to happen. You know, damn.
Yeah, it's like, geez, well, fuck, man. I mean, gosh. But
we put the potty mouth in autumn, didn't we, Jessica?
I just talk like this. If you want to edit me out, that's fine. I'm not going to be sad.
No.
If Mark was editing, we would just be bleeped, which would actually be comical in itself to be flat. But yes.
Yeah.
It would sound like an episode of Arrested Development, like when Buster's cussing, just that long string of and you beep, and you did this, and I woo.
No, I'm reminded of an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine in which Amy curses out one of the Hitchcock, and it's just like, you beep beep beep.
That's exactly what it would be like. We couldn't have a show if we edited it that way.
But yeah, so this next guy really breaks my heart, but thankfully there's not a lot of supporting details to make my heart break even more. So this is also our first infantryman. This is, the other guys that we've had were all aviators of some sort. This is our first infantryman. So Charles Norman Bailey of Company L, 350th Infantry Regiment, 88th Infantry Division. So Charles was born on October 13th, 1914. He would die on his 30th birthday on October 13th, 1944. And if that doesn't break your heart already, he was only drafted on January 6th of 1944. He wasn't even in for a year. Yeah.
God damn it.
He probably thought he was lucky. Like, he's like, oh, well, shit. I mean, we're doing all right here. I guess this is it. He was probably waiting for his draft summons for a while, and it kept not coming. Then he's like, oh, well, shit. All right. All right, this is okay. I can live through this. I can do this. I don't have too many friends that I've lost. Whatever. Nope. No, snuffed out like a light. He was just like a candle. He just
like a candle in the wind.
He was
killed. That's deeper than for Maryland. I have to admit. Shit, candle in the wind.
He's just, he was in the 88th Infantry Division, which is one of the first divisions that went overseas that was made entirely up of draftees, men that were drafted, no volunteers. These men were drafted. And back then there was a lot of stigma around, like, they basically thought they weren't as good. And so this is a big deal. These guys, and these guys fought in the Italian campaign, which most people don't realize lasted into 1945, people. This was a long slog. We were still fighting this shit when we surrendered, or when they surrendered to us in May We were still in Italy. So, in northern Italy. This was still a thing. This was bloody, too. A lot of people don't know how bloody Italy was. Italy was horrible. Every place they went, they had to fight for every square inch of territory with like 3 pints of blood. It was just very, very bad. And I believe he was killed around Monte Cassino. I could be wrong, but I believe it was around Monte Cassino. And if you guys know anything, I don't know if you do, but Monte Cassino was very bloody. That's the whole Monte Cassino. We'd been trying to get it for like months. And the only reason why the men that landed on Anzio, which came around behind Monte Cassino, landed there was because of the fact that we'd been throwing men at Monte Cassino for months and nothing was happening. They were just all dying. And so this guy was just another casualty of that fighting. And so, yeah, poor Charles. I mean, that one was rough. I believe he was married. It says his information, killed in action in the Mediterranean area, release of January 19th, 1945. So his wife had to wait a really long time to find out. Mrs. Pearl S. Bailey, wife. So he left behind a wife. I don't believe he had any children. I'm not sure, but it's possible since he was drafted so late. That could indicate that he had dependents, and that's why they waited to draft him for a while. But Charles lived at 29 Gould Street in Reading.
That one's rough.
Neighbors by any chance? I mean, I know the town is small, but
my neighbors would have lived by my house, or were these people next to each other?
Yeah.
There is one street in particular that I actually spoke with a woman who was about 10 years old when the war was going on, who lived on, I believe it was, I hope I'm not wrong. If she's listening, she will be so mad. Van Norden Road, I think it was, and they called it the melting pot of Reading because every house was like Polish immigrants, Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, everyone. And so she said it was the best place to grow up, because they celebrated so many different holidays, and there was so much food and so much love and, generosity and everything. And there was a street, a family down the street from them. I think maybe they were actually right next door. I'm not sure, but the Zitzaus, and the Zitzaus were Polish. And they had their boys were in the army. And then, there were some boys that lived right across the road from each other. I haven't looked at it a whole lot, but I know that there were definitely boys who would have come home and been standing there on the sidewalk waiting to go in, just drinking in the image of home after the war and looking at, hey buddy, where you been? Standing right on the other side. So I'm sure that there were definitely neighbors. I know that there were a lot of brothers. We had the Arsenal boys who all went in and all 4 came back. And mom had 4 blue stars hanging in her window, and one of her boys, James, went missing. And apparently the priest came over to the house, say, look, ma'am, with an army officer there, to tell her, one of your sons has gone missing in action. And he very dumbly said, well, usually when these things happen, we have no way of knowing what has happened to the man. Which, of course, didn't help her. I think he was trying to be calming, but it just wasn't, it was the opposite. But we had a lot of, and he was fine, living through the war. He wrote a book called Brothers of War, and it's about him and the 39 men that he was imprisoned with, and they all lived through the war. Every single one of them lived through the war.
That is
Brothers of War.
All right, I needed a little touch of good news. I'm glad you went ahead and peppered that in there. So that's there we go. I needed a pick me up.
I'll tell you, this is a funny story. He said that he got sick once, during the forced march that they were on, and his fever got really, really high. And this is in the middle of winter, as the Russians are advancing towards the German lines, and so the Germans are pulling their POWs back and back and back and back. Well, his buddy noticed that his fever was getting really high and needed to get him warm, needed to get him somewhere warm because he was also getting frostbite and everything. They put him in a pile of shit manure because it would keep it warm.
Oh.
And he said
Well.
it saved his life. He never thought eating shit would save his life.
Yeah.
That adds a new expression to it, right? Like when you tell somebody eat shit, you don't necessarily mean survive on shit.
I mean, he was a resilient fellow. But yeah,
I'm gonna pretend that these guys were the inspiration for Hogan's Heroes. That's what I'm gonna do in my head.
that's what but all right, here, yeah, so I'll go on. We can go on to our next boy here. We're about halfway. I apologize if this is long.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So this is another infantryman. This guy, I'll tell you about the first casualty that I talk about here because it's really interesting, but I wanted to save that to like tie in with him because I think they're both very intertwined. But so this is Charles Everett Perry of Company E, 182nd Infantry Regiment, 23rd Infantry Division. Now the 23rd Infantry Division has a very amazing story that I will touch on a little bit when I wrap up talking about him. But Charles Perry would become our second casualty of the war, like our second man killed, on November 26th of 1942 after being blown up by a mine while on Guadalcanal. It's unclear, and this was the Pacific, by the way, Guadalcanal. The first offensive action that our army took in all of the war was on Guadalcanal. And it wasn't even, it was started by our Marines, not our army. Our army came in to clean up. But the Marines did a hell of a good job there, and they earned their stripes there. No, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Marines and Guadalcanal became household names together back then. The Marines, yeah, that's one of the reasons why a lot of men joined the Marines. But he was actually a member of the medical detachment of the 182nd Infantry Regiment. He was Company E, and that was the medical detachment. Now, as I said, I'll tell you who our first casualty of the war was. Our first casualty of the war was Parker Kimball, and he was murdered. He was not, he was murdered.
Whoa.
He was on guard duty in New Caledonia. He was standing, New Caledonia was just our territory. We had it. We thought the Japanese might try to invade it, but they never did. And Parker was also a member of Company E, 182nd Infantry Regiment, 23rd Infantry Division. He's standing there with his rifle, on guard duty. It's around midnight. Guy from the engineer unit comes up and shoots him in the head. Just shoots him in the head.
Jesus.
Yeah. Now, if you look him up, you'll find that he was accidentally shot. No, there's a court-martial record. This was an incident. This was not an accident. This was an incident. I do not know what happened to the man that shot him. I think I may have found some records of him, but there were a lot of men with similar names. I think he got discharged, the guy who was dishonorably discharged, but I'm not sure. It's possible that they needed bodies so much that they just made him ride a desk for the rest of the war, but they definitely didn't give the guy a gun again. He walked up to Parker and just shot him. And actually our 1942 yearbook was dedicated to Parker Kimball. They put him right in the front page. They said, this is Parker Kimball, who graduated from the class in 1937, I think it was. Here's his photo. It was his portrait and everything. And so Parker was our first casualty. But he wasn't really a casualty, if you think about it. He had been murdered, yeah. And there wasn't even really much of a understanding of why. There was no indication that these men knew each other, that they had issues. It was just this guy literally just walked up to him while he was on guard duty and shot him. And the worst part, too, is that Parker actually lived briefly. He was alive for about 12 hours and then died. Yeah, he'd been shot. It went through the side of his head. And it just nicked enough of his brain that he was done. But they kept him alive for a little bit. God. Yeah.
That's a hell of a way to get a discharge or to go to desk duty, I guess.
Right.
Thank God Klinger just wore dresses. That at least made MASH interesting. I don't want to see that fucking episode where you just show up and shoot somebody in the face on guard duty. God. That's rough. It's so random.
Oh, yeah, it is. But yeah, and that's kind of the same thing with Charles. It was so random. I mean, the Americal Division, as they were called, the 23rd, they had come into Guadalcanal in October, I think, but the 182nd Regiment didn't come until a little bit after. And yeah, he just got blown up. It just says mine of some sort. Like, it's not even clear at all. It's even possible it wasn't a mine. That's how unclear it is. But he was also a very well-known member of our community. He was like a kid who a lot of people knew. And basically, what I will tell you, though, about the Americal Division is that it was actually, I believe, the first unit from our infantry to ever have a name before it had a number. They were the Americal Division before they were the 23rd Infantry Division. Now, Americal is just a combination of America and Caledonia. I think it's really stupid. I think they could have done a lot better with it, but it's just Americal. Yeah, I always thought it was a typo. I was like, did they just spell America wrong? Like, nope, America.
Well,
so the Americal Division is populated by 3 different states' National Guards. So the 182nd Infantry Regiment, there were a hell of a lot of Reading boys in the 182nd because that was where part of our National Guard went to, the Massachusetts National Guard, when they were mustered into active service on January 16th of 1941. A lot of these men were slated to go to this 182nd Infantry Regiment because troops were so desperately needed in the Pacific. We still didn't have a plan for what was going to happen in Europe. All we knew is that at some point we'd have to invade France. We hadn't even decided about Operation Torch, which was the invasion of North Africa. None of these decisions had been made yet. So they were like, well, we need troops here. Please help us. And so they put together a ragtag team of National Guard units and sent them. And actually the 164th Infantry Regiment, which was one of the other infantry regiments of the 23rd, which was not Massachusetts National Guard, I believe maybe it was Illinois, I'm not sure, but they actually were the unit that went in to try to relieve some of the pressure on the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal, and they came to be known as the 164th Marine Regiment out of affection. Like there was a lot of respect there amongst those men, as much as they, would jab each other. There was a lot of like, thanks, fuck you, like, there was like a whatever, man, But yeah, so Charles Perry of the 182nd, he lived at 7 Orange Street, Reading, Massachusetts.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a good one.
This next one.
Okay.
Ooh, this next one. This one hurts.
Ooh,
I'm
intrigued.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sorry.
Pull the trigger.
This was the second guy that I learned about that had been killed in action. This is the second one. The first one was a man named Frederick John Estes Jr., who's not included on this list because his death, albeit very interesting and slightly mysterious, is not exactly as significant, I think, as some of the others. So this guy, Fred Melvin Day, I know. I said that as soon as I was like, dude, like, what a name. Like, when I first, started working on him, I just knew him as the guy with the fun name. Fred Melvin Day, yes. Of the 3rd Battalion, 148th Infantry Regiment, 37th Infantry Division. The 37th Infantry Division was also a National Guard unit. It was Ohio's National Guard. But you have to understand, as men died, they needed to fill their spots. Or as men got transferred to units that needed men, they had to fill those spots. And so that's how Fred Melvin Day ended up in an Ohio infantry division. So Fred has a really, really emotional story. I actually got the chance to speak with his niece, who never met him. all she knew was Uncle Fred was killed in the war. That's what she knew. But she said that the family had always said that the story about him was that he was like an artist. Like he was not doing well. Like he was struggling. He was a struggling artist. And when he was drafted,
Aren't all artists struggling?
Yeah, this is true. They are struggling humans. We have to give them some love. But some of them do very well for themselves. So I guess Fred just was unlucky. I don't know. Maybe he was a bad artist. Like, they exist. People who love art just aren't good at it. Like, it's possible. I don't know. I don't know what he did. I don't know. I think he was a painter. I think that's what it was. But he loved art. When he was drafted, though, he truly started to come into his own. He had not really found a good place in life, being an artist. He just never found like a good place where he could sit and feel comfortable and wanted. And then he got drafted. And he was a smart guy. And so he was made an officer. And he loved being an officer. And his men loved him. And the Army gave him a purpose that he hadn't found in civilian life. And I don't know if I can screen share or anything, but one of the photos that I have of him here is very, very special to me. It says a lot about him. It's a photo of him standing with his mother in his uniform outside their home. And in all these photos I've seen of servicemen and their mothers, Mom is never smiling. In this photo, Mom is smiling because she's proud of her son. She's proud. Like she's proud of him. Aww. He's found his place. And you can see it on her face. It's just a little
tear on Jessica's face.
Yeah.
There is an actual tear.
Oh man, you got me. You got me. Autumn, you bitch. You got me.
But yeah.
Sure. I see the picture that you have here, and it's she's holding on to his arm and just biggest smile. It's very fresh.
Yeah, and he's just grinning. He's standing there like he's got like a little grin on his face. Mom is proud of him. And he's and I understand if you read the little thing next to there, he was very well liked by the men that he served with. He was very good at pinochle, apparently. I guess him and another guy like absolutely dominated everyone. And Fred Day's life, honestly, for an artist, had a very poetic end. He was fighting on Luzon in the Philippines, which was also a very bloody battle. This was in 1945. Fred would be killed on April 25th of 1945. He was wounded twice, by the way. He got a Purple Heart for the wound that killed him, but he had also been wounded about a month before he was killed by artillery, an artillery fragment. But wasn't that serious because he was able to return to his unit almost right away. But Fred was leading a patrol, and he got shot through the heart. And I feel like, for an artist and for a man who probably would have been a career officer, who probably would have served the rest of his time after the war, probably would have gone to Korea, maybe would have gone to Vietnam. I feel like it's a very poetic way for his life to have ended. It was quick. He probably died right away. Went right through his heart. But yeah, that was what happened. And I'm sure his mother was devastated when she heard the news that her son was killed. But I have to say, if there's any guy that I feel like went out in a way that was fitting for him, it would be Fred Melvin Day. And Fred lived on 18 Elm Street in Reading, Massachusetts, which is, I think, across town from me. But I've driven by his home a few times, admittedly. I'm sure the people who live there think it's kind of creepy. But yeah, so Yeah,
Oh,
Fred. I know. He always breaks
that
my
one got me.
Yeah.
That one
Okay.
got me.
Yeah.
I cry at like two things: veteran stories and
I had to go get a
sweet
clean
dog stories.
Sweet dog story. Oh no, Bethany.
Yeah, no.
I'm gonna go
I
get a
can't
clean.
do any old yeller. No old
Yeah.
yeller.
Oh no. Where the red fern grows and like Band of Brothers. If you want to just watch me ugly cry for hours, play those back to back.
There you go. Yeah. No, yeah, and well, so the next guy too. These are like we're getting into the hard hitters, by the way, if you haven't noticed.
Oh God.
But this.
Bethany's
Yeah.
getting her tissues.
Oh, okay.
Getting worse.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. Good plan. So, yeah, this guy is the one who, on the anniversary of his death, my college roommates woke me up, and like were really aware and sensitive of me the whole day, as though I were grieving the loss of a loved one. This was a guy whose death, we have this skeleton thing that we put on our door, like this like Halloween skeleton. He's really big, and we change his hat like every week or something. We'll make like a flapper hat or like a hat or something. Well, for this one of my roommates very sweetly drew a paratrooper's cap. And we put the paratrooper's cap on the skeleton's head on the date that he died.
Oh God!
So
damn, quit.
Yeah. This is the kid who gets me. This is the man who I firmly believe with every piece of me should be here today. I just feel it in my heart. For all I know, I could have, been there and like took the bullet for him and then he would have died the next day. This is how war is. But I just feel like if he hadn't gone that day, he would have lived through the war. Richard Charles Austin of Company B, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division. His death has stuck with me. His family was from Reading, and actually they lived in Reading for a long time after Richard was killed. He graduated from Reading High, and he'd actually been a cadet at Norwich University, which is one of the few private military colleges in the United States. He had been planning this before we had entered the war. He was a sophomore when he left school. He left school early in 1942 to go join the ski troops, which was the 10th Mountain Division, which, if you guys didn't know, the 10th Mountain Division, those are the guys that went around on skis in Italy. They served in northern Italy. And we have a few boys from town that served in the 10th Mountain Division. But for some reason or another, he got transferred to the 101st Airborne Division, and this really makes me happy. He was actually mentioned in Alex Kershaw's commencement speech at Norwich about a year ago or so. I don't know if you guys know who Alex Kershaw is. He wrote the longest
I follow his stuff. I told you to follow his stuff. Do you remember a couple months, Jessica? I said, this is an author. This is actually a guy that really goes into veteran stories. He's done a lot of oral interviews, especially D-Day. He's actually done a lot of stuff on Robert Capa, who was a famous D-Day photographer as well.
Capa. Yeah.
Oh, you know Robert Capa?
Of course I know Robert Capa. Yeah. But
you go to the rabbit hole of Jared Taro if you're going to do that. So it was just great.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was just amazing because when I was writing the article that I was writing about his death, which is actually one of my favorite articles. I feel like it really is great, but it's one of the ones that I'm the proudest of. I just looked up Richard Charles Austin, Norwich, University one last time. And I come up with a hit from Alex Kershaw's commencement speech. Unfortunately, I emailed Alex Kershaw to see if he could give me a copy of the speech because I couldn't find the speech. All I found was an article on the Norwich news site about how he mentioned a man named Richard Austin, who was a cadet at Norwich University, who was one of the Screaming Eagles, and that's the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, that dropped into Normandy. And I was like, well, fuck. Holy shit. But unfortunately, I never heard back from him. Yeah, I never heard back from him. I did like tag him in the tweet that I tweeted out when I tweeted out my article about like Richard, and he liked the tweet. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, so Richard was killed in Operation Market Garden, which is a very unique yeah.
Can you tell us about that? Because I will tell you what, if there is one particular thing that my dad liked when I went over to Normandy in 2019, he really, if I had had more time, he really wanted me to visit that region because you think of Normandy, you think of like all the victories that the Allies had, but that was not it. That was not, the Germans fought very hard, and they in Operation Market Garden, I think if you want to give a nutshell of it, please do, Autumn, because I don't think the average person knows.
Yeah, Operation Market Garden. Yeah, it was a very unique and unfortunately misled paratrooper operation that ended up dropping 3 divisions of Allied boys super far behind enemy lines, only to get slaughtered. What ended up happening was this was the big plan that was unfortunately influenced by one of humanity's many faults. Feeling good about yourself when you're doing well. We were feeling good. We were on a high. We had taken Normandy. We'd taken France. We'd taken back Paris, for God's sake. Why could we not be pushing for the Rhine River? And as you may know, the Rhine River, we shed a lot of blood over that in the early months of 1945. So, of course, this operation was not successful. This was the operation that the movie A Bridge Too Far was based upon, because it was one bridge too far. The British Airborne Division was dropped to take Arnhem Bridge. The 82nd Airborne Division was dropped to take Nijmegen Bridge, and the 101st Airborne Division was dropped to take Eindhoven and the bridges around Eindhoven. This was all like a path, so the 101st Airborne Division was the closest to the friendly lines. And then the 82nd was in the middle, and the British were as far away as they could be. The plan was to have British armored units push up from the current front line and race through towards the 101st Airborne Division at Eindhoven. They did do that. They did manage to reach Eindhoven. The problem in all of this was that everyone thought that the troops defending Holland were old men and children. They were SS. They were not old men and children. And they got slaughtered. The 101st, and the worst part about this too is that these men did a good job. It just came down to the British holding Arnhem, and they couldn't, and it was not their fault. They fought like dogs over Arnhem. They fought so hard that when they surrendered to the SS Commandant, the SS Commandant came out and shook the British officer's hand and offered their wounded safe passage to a hospital. They ordered a ceasefire. They got German medics to bring the British paratroopers through their lines to hospitals.
Wow.
That's how much respect was there. That was a bloody battle. That was like the equivalent of like Goliath and like freaking Yamamoto, meeting somewhere, like shaking hands. Like, geez, that was something else. That was a really bloody battle. And for reference to one of our other boys in the 82nd Airborne came in with the gliders. And I feel like this just puts into perspective for you guys what happened at Operation Market Garden. As the gliders were coming in, a few days after the paratroopers had actually come in, they were coming in to land in the field. The field was so filled with Germans. The field had fucking tanks there. There were 2 fucking tanks sitting in the field. And the American paratroopers, the 505th, you know what they did to try to make it safe for the gliders to land? Because these are made out of canvas. The gliders are made out of canvas. One tank shell would have killed like probably 2 of them. Would have gone through one into the other. And they're full of artillery pieces too. You got to remember, and all that ammunition. That's all just going to blow up. So the paratroopers of the 505th knew we need to get these Germans out of this field, and we need to do it now. You know what they did? They charged into the field. They just charged. There was nothing else they charged into the field. And as the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment was landing in the field, the Germans were running away because they were surprised. They were surprised by the 82nd Airborne Division just throwing themselves, their flesh bodies, not, armor, into a field at tanks, and it scared the shit out of the Germans because they weren't expecting something so crazy to happen. And that's what they said. The glider infantry, as they came out of the planes, they were like being helped up, by the paratroopers and everything. They're looking at these guys like they're heroes because they were. It's like, damn, all right. So that really is that kind of is what Operation Market Garden was. So for Richard Charles Austin and the 101st Airborne Division, one thing that you should know about Market Garden is that every regiment really was assigned a different place to land. So every division has about 3 regiments in it. So not that that's that important, but just in case you were wondering. So there's about 3.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And so there were about 3 different places that these guys could drop. On September 17th, that was when Operation Market Garden started. And one thing that's really amazing about this is that it was the perfect drop. In the movie, A Bridge Too Far, they do a great job of portraying it by showing this congregation in Holland, in their church singing, because it was a Sunday. They're singing hymns, and all of a sudden they hear the drones of engines. And people start going outside looking up this just C-47 after C-47 after C-47 after C-47. And all these white big chutes in the sky, coming out of the sky, just coming out of the sky. And all the people are like, oh my God, they're going to liberate us. At first they thought they were Germans, and then they really saw the star on the plane, and they're like, oh my God, this is literally like you are an angel falling from the sky. One of the biggest problems that happened on September 17th, the worst thing that happened, was they couldn't get the people off of the paratroopers. They were just shoving them in food and alcohol and giving it, you got to think, if you're going to die during Operation Market Garden, you died happy. In some way, you were welcomed like a hero. And that's exactly what happened to Richard Charles Austin. They landed a little bit off from where they were supposed to land. This was around the area of Vagel. That's the name of the town. But they dropped about 5 miles away from it. So they had to get moving right away because all of this was very time sensitive, because all of this was basically hitched on the British holding at Arnhem until the armor from the current front line could reach them. So they got moving towards the town of Vagel, and as they were going, people were just coming out into the streets and throwing themselves at these men, kissing them and hugging them and throwing flowers and food and and wine and all these things at them, and they were they had to get the people to stop. So they had to they got the MPs to hold back people. And so, of course, unfortunately for Richard, they seemed to get the really crappy job every time. B Company ended up being in the lead, the lead going down the road. But on the night of September 17th, going into the 18th, there wasn't a lot of enemy contact. They made some contact with patrols, but this was what was expected. Remember, they thought they were fighting old men and children. So they weren't expecting a lot of contact. They were expecting maybe some probing, patrols from the Germans to see what was going on. They didn't expect a full-on attack. So this was okay. This was going as planned so far. There was firing in the distance, obviously. And they'd taken a few casualties. Remember, casualties could be killed or wounded, not just killed. But problems started developing. Reports from the Dutch underground indicated that there were about 700 Germans in the town of Dinter, which was between the 501st and the 506th, which is the famous regiment that's portrayed in Band of Brothers. They needed to get those Germans out from in between them if they wanted the armor that had just recently linked up with the 506th to make it to the 501st. Because that's kind of how this was. It was like hot potato. Everyone get the armor. Oh, then goes to the next guy, goes to the next guy, right? So this was bad. Now, part of Company B ended up advancing through an open field in which Company A had been cut off sometime the next day, the 18th. And they saw Germans holding white handkerchiefs. So they assumed that these men were surrendering. So slowly, the Americans approached, and the Germans opened fire. And mowed them down. Thankfully, they didn't kill any of them. They only wounded them, but yeah, this was the type of shit they were dealing with. The situation continued to get worse, with Company C of the 1st Battalion in a very bad situation on the other side of, I think it's pronounced Schijendel, but I'm not exactly sure. So this was over a small bridge, another town. This was, I believe, between Dinter and them. I don't think it was past Dinter. But anyway, Company C was trapped. They were stuck there. And so the morning of September 22nd, Richard and the men of Company B met enemy tanks. So this was unexpected. All of a sudden, there are like 3 German panzers sitting in front of them. And you have to imagine, as a paratrooper, you are light infantry. You don't have like big guns or anything. This was terrifying. They freaking rolled around a corner and there's a panzer sitting there watching the street. You know, I mean, I imagine that's how this was discovered. So at some point, they were forced to pull back until friendly tanks showed up, and they finally did show up at 10 a.m. And I imagine, and I assume too, Richard was probably still alive at this point. He did die on the 22nd. He was probably woofing and hollering. I mean, when they saw the friendly tanks, they were like, "Oh, thank Jesus! Like there is a God." It was a relief for all these men. But sometime on September 22nd, 1944, Richard was killed by a mortar round. It was a fragment while he was leading a platoon. I kind of think that he probably didn't die right away. There's a scene in Band of Brothers in the Battle of the Bulge where they're sitting there with this guy who's been shot in the neck, laying out in the snow, and they can't get to him. And I kind of imagine that's what happened to Richard. He was the lead member of the platoon. As soon as he was fired on, all the other guys had to get out of there. And I kind of hope that someone, you know, came to him and held his head, you know, and just pushed his hair out of his face and just held him while he was there. I don't really think he died right away. I hope he didn't. I hope that, you know, someone was there, or he at least thought, oh, someone's going to rescue me. Someone's going to come get me. I hope that he had the thought, like, they care enough about me that they're sitting there like, oh my God, Richard, you know, like, and it's my understanding that Company B only lost 3 men that day. Like, 3 men. 3 men. Like, yeah.
God damn it, Autumn. You're not supposed to make me cry in my own show.
I'm sorry.
I've just been sitting here bawling like a,
Yeah.
I'm
3
telling
men.
you guys.
Wow.
Very, very sad stuff.
Veterans and dogs, man.
I've had some tears.
Dogs.
God.
So he was.
I don't want to imagine what they were going through. Like, you know, because can you imagine, even for the people that didn't die, right? Like, even for your, like you said, casualties does not mean dead. It means injured as well. And those people would have suffered long-lasting repercussions from seeing their friends, like as you described, this gentleman pass away, and probably, like you said, it was, I would imagine, not immediate.
Yeah. And yeah, so he lived at 180 Prescott Street. And his 2 parents, Elma and Irving, they had actually been town boosters for a while. And they actually, his dad was on the I think he was on like the town juror, like, you know, like back then they had, like, it wasn't now like you get called for jury duty, you were on a list, and if it was your year you got, he was like a town juror for years and everything. They stayed here, and I feel like that really speaks to their resilience as a family. You know, if I had lost, I mean, they only had one other child, they had their younger daughter. and that was her big brother, and that was the guy who everyone knew too. They didn't really know her. They knew Richie, or Dick, as they called him around town. They knew Dick. They knew Dick. That was who they knew. And then they were like, oh yeah, you're Dick's like kid sister. Okay. And so I'm surprised they didn't move away. I feel like I would have. I would have been like, there's too much here for me. I can't handle it. But they stayed. They stayed here for a long time. And I remember visiting his grave, Richard, when I went through the graves with the cemeteries with my boyfriend. And I just sat there with my boyfriend, and we just looked at the headstone for a while. And, and so Richard, yeah, he's my little guy. He's the guy who I said, if he were alive, he'd be 97, and I'm sure he'd be kicking around. I bet he would. But he was, and the sad thing to me, he's such a beautiful young man. He'd done so much already, trying to leave school and everything. And they, as you can see in the photos here too, class of 1944, they counted him as graduated. They gave him a posthumous degree. They put him in the yearbook, which is what they did for a lot of the men who left school and ended up dying from his class. But yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, that was a rough one. Seriously.
Number 9. So this guy's story is sad, but I don't know why, but I think maybe it's because I got numbed by some of my other boys. This guy, I think his father's story is almost sadder than his, but Arthur Frederick Reese. And this is really not that important, but I'll tell you his unit. 27th Material Squadron. Yeah, it's Material because it's I don't know, it's just different than Material. I don't know. 20th Air Base Group. Now, Arthur Reese had been in the Army since October 14th of 1940. So he was one of the OGs. He was one of the unlucky men that happened to be stationed in the Philippines when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I don't know how many people know about, what happened. It wasn't just Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor got bombed, and then the Japanese thrust into the Philippines. And that's where we get the Bataan Death March. That's where that happened. All of a sudden, all these men had Japanese soldiers closing in on them from every angle, and they had to surrender. They held out for as long as they could at Corregidor. And when Corregidor fell, that's when we knew this was going to be a long war. And a lot of these men had to surrender. Now, technically speaking, Arthur Frederick Reese was not a member of the original Bataan Death March. He wasn't captured until after the fact, but he was definitely marched to the place that he would die because it was a long way from where he was captured. And the Japanese, as many people know, were not very kind about this type of stuff. Well, when Arthur Frederick Reese went missing in action, his father heard about it, Arthur Garfield Reese, and he was so angry and so sad, and he did the unthinkable. He wanted vengeance, so he lied about his age and went and enlisted in the Army at the age of 62. He lied. He said that he was born in 1897. The guy was born in 1880. He wanted vengeance for his son. He wanted to know that he had done something, after this had happened.
This is where I cry.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So it wasn't until he reached New Caledonia, which I mentioned previously that about Parker Kimball, who was shot on New Caledonia. So this was just a garrison. This was just like a base of operations. Well, it wasn't until he reached New Caledonia and he started having problems with his back that his true age was discovered when he was taken to a hospital for back problems. And he was discharged as a result of this in September of 1942. Now, his son's status will be updated to killed on November 11th, 1942, Armistice Day, also known as Veterans Day. I cannot imagine how his father felt. like, to put this in perspective for you guys too, there was another man from our town who was a Marine, and he got shot through the eye, leg, shoulder, face, and chest, and lived. And instead of discharging him, they kept him in the Marines and had him ride a desk back in the States. So just take that into account. They would not let this 62-year-old man who had a minor back problem ride a desk somewhere because he wanted to get back at the Japanese for what happened to his son.
Wow.
They discharged him. They just said, I'm sorry, your time
It
here
can't
is-"
be about the principle of lying, because so many people lied, right? Like in those days in World War I and II, that was commonplace. In fact, recruitment centers would knowingly tell people,
just
more or
lie.
less, like, walk out and then come back in and tell me, you're 18, or tell me you're 17, or what have you.
Yeah.
So that's knowing that is heartbreaking, that he couldn't at least, like you said, have an office job somewhere, feel like he's being put to use, even in a clerical position. Like, my God. Like, I want to find whoever was his.
I know. And when you hear the story, he would have been arriving home probably around the time that this news was broken, because it took them about a month or so to get these guys through discharge, through the process, get them on the trains. First of all, he had to get on a boat, and they didn't just say, oh, this one guy needs to come home, bring us a boat. They would just send you on whatever boat happened to be in the area. So, this guy would have been coming home probably around the time that this news reached the family, and I'm sure it broke him. And if that wasn't hard enough too, his wife, this man's Arthur Garfield Reese's wife, all her brothers were in the service too. And so it was very hard on this family. Like, this was like big stuff for them. Luckily, all their other boys did come home. The Reese boys, all of them came home, including Dad, obviously. But it was just, it really hurt. I mean, it was just a different type of pain, I think. It's like fear, like helplessness. Like, I can't do anything, It's not like he got shot. He died I think he died of dysentery. It was dysentery. If you look at the roster, it's like Barry, dysentery. He was dysentery. And so, poor kid, but, and he was, 1918, 1942, so 28, 38. So he was in his 20s, his mid-20s, probably 25, maybe 24. But he and his family lived at 48 Village Street in Reading.
Oh gosh, this is the only time that I hate. I mean, I'm very glad you can't see us, but this is one of those times in podcasting that I wish people could see us, because I'm just sitting here bawling like a bitch while Autumn gets through this like a champ. Yeah, and so is Bethany. We're a Kleenex squad. I'm wiping like my nose on my robe with the extreme sniffles.
I'll get these right. So, I
think I'm just only not like that one. That last story got me though. Like, the father wanting I don't know. That's like, all of them are sad, but for particular, I don't fucking know why, but that one got me.
Yeah, because I think you picture the old man, wanting to be there some way for his son, who, this guy lived through the First World War. To know that. I feel like that's kind of why it's harder. Like, it's because he knows what a war is. He lived through one.
And technically, he lived through World War II as well, because he went and joined and then also came back.
Yeah.
Can you imagine thinking you're the dad and you survive both World War I and II, and your kid.
Your son doesn't. Yeah.
And then I guess to me the other component of what makes this awful is how he died. Because if there's one thing I do remember from AP history, and that was iterated in a couple of my interwar and World War II courses in college, it's particularly how vivid the Bataan Death March was. And
you did not want to be captured by the Japanese. That's some Unit 731 shit that you don't want to be like, Jesus.
No. The baptism by fire.
Bethany, I will prepare you. if you Google stuff,
just don't.
It's legitimately triggering and not in like an okay way. Honestly, in a very upset.
I'll give you the like really like simple like summary. Really, the baptism by fire for the Marines on Guadalcanal was on the first day of Guadalcanal. Not the first day. It was like the first week of the campaign on Guadalcanal in 1942, the winter of 42. The Marines captured a Japanese prisoner that said that all of them were starving. Like all the Japanese soldiers were starving. He wasn't lying, by the way. He was serious. They were starving. And he told the Americans, he said, I think they might be willing to give up. So they sent a patrol on a little boat over to where the Japanese positions were with a white flag. Only one man came back. And they found the rest of the bodies mutilated. And that's what they said. The baptism by fire was when a guy came over to try to retrieve the bodies and one of the man's penises had been cut off and stuffed in his mouth. And that's when they were like, this is not the war we thought we were fighting. Oh. And I think like that is what sums up, like that was the baptism by fire. That was like, oh shit. For us, like this was different. This was not the Germans. This is not like their weird code of honor that so many stories have come from. This was burnt, like scorched earth policy.
Surrender wasn't a thing. Oh
yeah. I'm just putting on my sweatshirt here. Here we go. So our next guy, we're almost there. We're almost done. This kid, I feel really proud of that I was able to find out about him. Because for the longest time, I thought Reading, Massachusetts only had one Distinguished Service Cross recipient. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Distinguished Service Cross sits just below the Medal of Honor in the, hierarchy of medals. Stewart Parker Greenen of Company I, 324th Infantry Regiment, 44th Infantry Division. This guy's story is really sad. But like I said, I am so proud to have found him. It was pure luck that I found out about this man. Technically, we share him with, I believe it's Malden, because his family, he actually grew up in Malden, but during the war and when he was drafted, he was living in Reading. His family lived in Reading. That's where the telegram was sent, to inform the family of his death. Reading. So we kind of share him. Malden, I think, claims him. But he's ours too, and I'm very proud about that. Stewart is the youngest guy on this list. I'll tell you that. He's the youngest guy out of all of our guys that died. He was born on March 23rd, 1926. He was only 18 years old when he was drafted. And you remember how I told you about that guy who got drafted January 6th, 1944?
Like the old guy?
Yeah, the guy who was going to turn 30, died on his 30th birthday. Yeah, that guy. This guy was drafted on October 30th, 1944, less than a year before the war in Europe would end. Just 7 months, and he would have been out free. 7 months. So Stewart's story is one that really broke my heart when I discovered it. And I will pull up on my computer here his citation so that I can read it. Let me grab it here. My apologies, it's just being finicky. Here we go, here it is. Okay. So anyway, Stewart, he made an impression on me, I'll tell you that. On April 22nd, 1945, while fighting in a small village in the vicinity of Bad Überkingen in Germany, an enemy grenade came in the window of the home that he and 7 of his buddies were taking shelter in without hesitation. Without a second thought, He ran, picked the grenade up, hugged it to his body as though like he were carrying a football, the way you carry a football, and began running towards the window to throw it out. The grenade went off before he could get it outside, though, and the blast killed him immediately. But each of the 7 men survived, thanks to him. And I'll see if I can find his, should be right here, his little citation.
That is so sad.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just like, again, I'm getting my twice a year really good cry out.
All right, here's the citation. So, the President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, July 9th, 1918, takes pride in presenting the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously to Private Stewart P. Greenen, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism in action while serving with Company I, 3rd Battalion, 324th Infantry Regiment, 44th Infantry Division, in action against an armed enemy 22nd April 1945 in the vicinity of Bad Oberkingen, Germany. During a strong enemy counterattack, one of the enemy managed to work his way unobserved to the edge of the house occupied by Private Greenen and 7 of his buddies. Before they realized what was happening, a grenade was tossed through the broken window into the room they were occupying. Unhesitatingly, Private Greenen raced to it, snatched it up, and thrust the live grenade against his body, similar to the carrying of a football. He ran towards the window to throw it out, but before he could accomplish this, the grenade exploded, killing him instantly. Private Greenen's courage and spirit of self-sacrifice is worthy of emulation and reflects great credit upon himself, the 44th Infantry Division, and the United States Army.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
I know. And what a man he was for only 18 years old. I don't think I could have done that. I probably just would have sat there.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
I know.
Like for you being a peer, like shit. Does that resonate? Like when you heard about, I guess, that story, did that resonate based on kind of the relatability of age, right?
Yeah. I mean, because you think like this kid, he got lucky if you think about it. I mean, he didn't get drafted until like October 44. That's pretty good. You think the chances that you'll make it at that point are pretty decent, especially if you go to Europe and not the Pacific.
True.
And he just, he cared too much about his buddies in that house, and he cared, I guess, too much in a good way because all of them lived, and all of them lived to tell that story. And that's why he got that medal. I mean, because if you know the detail about him carrying it like a football, that's not something that's usually included in citations. That was probably something that one of the guys said, like, dude, like, when he told his officer how this guy died, because that's how these medals were awarded. An officer had to put you up for one. He said, man, like he was carrying it, like he was like a running back. Like it was like, this was going with him, like wherever he went, it was going. That was a detail that's not usually included in citations. So that was a guy who recounted this story to an officer, maybe all of them. So I'm sure that they never forgot his name for the rest of their lives. But he was something else, and his family, here you go, lived at 96 Van Norden Road, Reading, Massachusetts, from the melting pot.
I really don't know why, but every time I think I'm going to be okay, you say their address and I get more teary-eyed.
I do too. When you say the address, I'm out.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's okay. This one, so our last one, this last one is the one that I think has like a slightly happy ending, but it's like an ugly cry happy ending. I don't know how to as I say this as I run out of water. So Russell Harris Francis, he's not technically a Reading boy. His wife is from Reading. She lived in Reading. She grew up in Reading. She married him and lived in Reading while he was away. So he probably visited Reading at least once. He was a member of Company A, 51st Armored Infantry Battalion, 4th Armored Division. And Russell was an officer. He was a lieutenant. I think he was a first lieutenant at the time of his death, but he could have been a second lieutenant. I'm not sure. But anyway, he wasn't exactly from Reading. His wife was, and his young son did live in Reading as well with her. And they lived there for almost all of Russell's time in the service. After being drafted in June of 1943, Russell would head to Europe, and he would fight with the 4th Armored Division. From there, I mean, he lived quite a while before he died, which is kind of unique. For most of these guys, they didn't last that long. On March 1st of 1945, after some very heavy combat, the sun rose up over the lines of the 51st Armored Infantry Battalion, and the Germans began shelling the lines. You know, and shelling, a big shelling, especially, is a sign of a counterattack, and that's exactly what was happening. A counterattack was coming. And Russell's casualty card, it doesn't say artillery shell fragment. That's usually what it says. It just says artillery shell, which leads me to believe that he was in a foxhole that got hit directly by an artillery shell. There wasn't anything left of Russell Harris Francis.
I guess if that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, he probably heard. I mean, that's the thing they say about artillery, by the way. If you don't hear it, that's when it's bad. If you hear it, then it's like, okay, you're good. If you hear it whistle, you hear it, you're good. If you don't hear it, that means you're going to probably die. So yeah, I mean, he probably just poked his head out of his foxhole for a second and went boom. And that was it for him. And there were a lot of casualties that day, too. And they held their line, miraculously. They held their line. But the news would reach his family not long after. And this is what I think is amazing. On May 3rd of 1946, his widow, Helen O'Dowd of 50 Prospect Street, Reading, attended a ceremony at, I think it was at Logan Airport, in which deceased servicemen's next of kin were receiving and accepting any medals that they had earned posthumously, because obviously they couldn't give them to a dead guy. So they were, giving them to the next of kin. And instead of accepting the award herself, Helen asked that their 4-year-old son, Paul, be handed the Silver Star that his father had died earning. And so I feel like that is like, for that kid, I think that must have been a moment of great sadness and great pride, to think like, okay, daddy is gone. I mean, because for a lot of times, like a lot of these kids were so young that they couldn't understand this. This kid was 4, so he'd probably met his dad at least once, probably, before dad had to go. He probably wouldn't remember his dad. I mean, because he was so young when he knew his father. But what he would remember, probably for the rest of his life, was that his dad won a Silver Star that got put in his hand. And I think like that's a good memory to have of your father, to know that he died doing something that was worthy of being proud of. And so for that kid, I bet that was a bittersweet. It first of all, it brought closure. It was like, okay, dad is dead. This is true. I'm 4 years old. I have a hard time with object permanence. That's like the things that kids have a hard time with. And so yes, so this is closure. This is closure for him. This is also closure for his mother. This is a big moment for them. And instead of receiving it herself, she has her son receive it. And I thought that was very meaningful. I'm sure that was cherished by that kid for the rest of his life. And I do know that Paul Francis graduated from Reading High School as a member of the class of 1958. So they lived here. They lived here for a while. And so, yeah, so Russell himself didn't ever live at 50 Prospect Street, but his wife and his young son did.
Oh, I have the address.
Well, you made it, though. That's it. That's
but
number 11.
barely. I'm like limping in. I look like I've been punched in the face 75 times.
Oh. Well, I mean, as I promised, if you want, I know this is getting long, so I understand if not. I can share some of the funny, happy stories that I've learned. Yeah?
Yes, please do. The palate cleansers. The palate cleansers.
So, this.
Because I must not be a blobbery mess over here.
All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
my favorite story. So I'm going to tie this story in with like a current day story. So during all the COVID stuff and everything, there were a lot of people who were sharing posts from nursing homes where the older people there were asking, write to me, like, because they can't be visited by their family. And so there were all these things like, like, write to me, like, I like this, my name is this, and I like this. And there was this one guy who, like, 5 of my friends texted me about, my name is Matt, and I like war stories. In a nursing home. In a nursing home in I think it was like New Mexico or something. And I wrote to him, and unfortunately I never heard back, but I did write to him. And I told him about my favorite story that I've learned during all of this like research and everything. It's hilarious. It really cracks me up. And it's about the 30th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron of the the 90th, right? No, wait, it's the 30th. Okay, we're good. I'm pretty sure. I want to check now because I'm going to be mad at myself. They're from the 30th Infantry Division though, and I have a sneaking suspicion that they were not the same number as the division as was common for reconnaissance squadrons. Let me embarrass myself here.
That's the spirit of this show. I embarrass myself weekly.
So, the 30th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron of the 30th Infantry Division. So we actually had 2 boys from Reading in that unit. And that's a very small, like a cavalry reconnaissance squadron is very tiny. Like it's not a big unit at all. So it's really crazy that we had 2 boys in there. Actually, both of them would be captured by the Germans together. And they always said that they were the reason, like the other guy was the reason why the German guards didn't kill them, like because they were both a bit assholey, and they were like very and so they always said that like it was like, oh, it was Herbie's fault I didn't get shot, like Herbie's fault, instead of like, oh, thank God for Herbie, and so Herbert, Elliot, Stewart, and Bernard David Duchette, they were the 2 Reading boys that were in the 30th. And I guess after they broke out from Normandy and they were headed into Belgium, they stopped in this tiny little town in Belgium on their way. And, these men hadn't eaten a hot meal since like June 5th. Like they, because they were on high alert, to go in. They didn't go in the invasion, like they were not there on D-Day or anything, but they, they were on alert, so they, they didn't really get like, they were always anxious. So the last like hot meal they had that they were like, woo, steak and eggs, was like June 5th or so. So here they are, and this is like September of 1944, and they haven't eaten like something good in almost 6 months, and they're like, going through this little town, and it's really late at night. It's like 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and they see this diner in this town, and so they go in, and they're all like buying all this food, and the storekeeper is like, now, here, some backstory for you. The month before, they had captured a German payroll, and they were supposed to turn in the money, but they didn't. They kept the money. So they had all this money on them. Okay, so flash forward. Now they're back in the diner. And the owner, he says, look, guys, I have to close. Like, I can't, stay open all night. Like, I'm sorry. I gotta close. And one of the guys goes, dude, but, we haven't all eaten. He said, I understand, but I have to close. They bought the restaurant with the money from the German payroll. They bought it. And it wasn't even like they bought it. They just bought it so that it would stay open for the night. And then it would close. Like, it was just like a contract. Like, they wrote up a contract that said that he had to stay up all night and cook all night.
Right.
Yeah, right? And then they left. The next day, they rolled out of town. And he got to keep the money.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
Thank you, Autumn. Thank you. I needed that. I needed that.
Yeah. So oh, yeah. What a hilarious group of guys. I mean, that must have been...
That came full circle.
I mean, bro, like, that's freaking hilarious.
Wow.
The only other story, unless you're... I have one other.
Yeah, tell it.
All right. This one's pretty quick. So this is about we have at least one guy that I know of from our town, Paul William Connolly, who completed his tour as like a bomber, a crew on a bomber. He was the navigator, I think, or was he the bombardier? I can't remember. He was either the bombardier or the navigator, but they completed all 35 of their missions, which is quite a big deal. And that was very rare, and they got to go home, but I guess when it all started off, and I spoke to the grandsons of the pilot, who was, the pilot of their crew. Obviously, Paul wasn't the pilot. Robert Hall was the name of the pilot. And Robert Hall was from Texas, I believe. And he, I'm pretty sure it was Texas. And because they both of those sons live in Texas now. But Robert Hall was very religious. And when their tour started with the 94th Bombardment Group in England, the day of their first mission, he went to the chapel to go pray, and he invited the rest of the crew to come with, and they said no thank you, no thank you, Robert, like we just kind of we're really anxious, we want to go get on the plane and like get ready. And he was like, okay. They survived that mission, they survived the next mission, they survived the mission after that, and they're like, okay, what could it hurt? And so they go to the chapel, they start going to the chapel with him. By the time that they were going to leave for their 35th mission, they had the entire fucking base praying with them in the morning at the chapel.
Oh my God.
Whoa. Yeah, because, they all knew, they understood the significance. Like, this is like 35 missions and you get to go home. So everyone at that point was rooting for them, and then they got the whole base down to the chapel to go pray with them.
Praise Jesus.
Hooray!
Yes, everybody looks Pentecostal by the end of that. Everybody's like dancing in the aisles. It turned into like holy roller, shit. Like, yeah.
It's really funny. So that was the other one I had, but yeah.
Seriously, you've taken me on a crazy journey, because you talked about certain battles that I didn't really know that much about, but you gave me enough detail to where I understood that it was just bloody and fucked up and lots of died. So I can't believe I think I've only cried like maybe twice on our show. I think one was for a freaking bird. So
Jeremy, was it Jeremy?
It's my fave. Can we all just take a moment? God bless Jeremy, that fucking honorable bird. I'm the only person besides Jessica.
We also served.
Oh, can I add? Look what Leah made me in honor of Jeremy, I might add. So, not one-eyed. If it wanted, it needs to be pierced through the chest. Like, if we're gonna make this historically accurate. But my God. Autumn, I would be, and I'm sure they're interested. They don't know about, I don't think Sergeant Stubby that much, as well as some of the other animals. I think that would be a good follow. Almost.
That's a dog. I know. Nope. There's reason we haven't and won't be doing that one, because if you think I'm ugly crying now,
it's a happy story.
Ish
in that one.
It's a dog with a job. which always makes me cry. And it's a hero dog with a job. I can't.
Didn't he? I think he lived a long life too,
Yeah,
Sergeant.
he actually did.
He was
did
like
turn
a
out. Like he dodged death several times, to be honest, which is death
freaking
adjacent and happy. So I mean, if we ever had to do a mini-sode, I'm just saying Sergeant Stubby, and it sounds like Miss Autumn here knows about her shit. So
Sergeant Stubby.
Yeah. Well, this has been okay. I do have to say you deserve a medal because I think for the first and only time ever, all three of us were brought to silence, like bated breath silence.
It's true.
Somebody's always got to make a smart ass comment to fill the air. That's just like that's what a podcast is.
Yeah.
But we all waited in silence, total crickets, deafening silence for the rest of a story, which never happens and will never happen again.
No,
Well, I don't know about crickets. I don't know if you heard crickets because it was sniffling, is what you probably heard.
Yeah,
that was silence. It was a sniffly silence. No.
I really wanted to say how much I was crying so everybody didn't think we had a cocaine problem on this show. Like it was just, it was a lot of
Yeah. Yep. Hey, it's all right. Like, if anyone understands that, it's me.
That's the thing. I can't even cry classy. So, you know.
My boyfriend says I have like the most weird, like he says I sound like a wounded animal when I cry.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so being around me when I cry, oh, no. Not fun. Not fun at all.
Well, that was a hell of an episode. It was, again, I thought I was going to be upset about being sad, which I knew I was going to be sad. I was not. This was a freaking treat. So I want you to go through again where it is that everybody can find your things, find your articles, where they can follow you, the names of the groups and all the stuff.
Yeah. So again, I'm Autumn Hendrickson. And if you'd like to look at my writing, that I've already done, I haven't written my book yet. That'll be a few years from now that I finish it, I'm assuming. But you can keep up with the articles that I'm writing, which I'm still working on. I have every intention to finish out the war with the articles too. You can find me at the Reading Post, which again is spelled reading. I don't want to talk about it. thereadingpost.com /author /A Hendrickson /. If you want to follow me on Twitter, which I share a lot of stuff on Twitter, some of it's social justice, some of it's my writing, some of it's history, pictures, and that kind of stuff, you can find me at __autumn leaf __. I don't know why I added those underscores. I guess autumn leaf was taken. And then my Facebook page for like all things Readings Boys is www.facebook.com /Reddingsboys. And as I said at the beginning, that's subject to change since we have quite a few badass women, including a woman who won a Bronze Star from Reading, Massachusetts. So that'll probably be changed at some point in the future. So
You should Reading Heroes.
Reading's here. I mean, I was thinking Reading's Warriors or Reading's, something like, I mean, we're also the Rockets.
Yeah.
We're the Reading Rockets. So I don't know. But we used to be the Pioneers. So back in the World War II days, our mascot was a pioneer, whatever that looks like. I don't know. I mean, a pioneer can be so many things. But anyway, so yeah. But I don't know. I was also thinking Reading's original Rockets. You know, like our original like Rockets, like instead of the OGs.
The OG barrages of Reading.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, so many of these guys come from very old Reading families too. So, but yeah.
You know, Autumn, you know, I think I know a couple of folks you need to talk to. Jessica, tell me Peter and Autumn would not be the best of friends.
Oh, the best.
He's actually around your age, and he specifically, he used to do Badger State History podcast. Now he does shelf reading podcasts. So he works at a library right now, but his main focus, and he's worked at different facilities in Wisconsin, has really looked, and even a lot of his research has overlapped World War II. So I really, man, I just want to make this friendship happen.
For sure.
Make
I didn't need to do the eyebrows. That I actually just do that a lot, but that was an awkward timing.
Yeah. Kara's pulling the Groucho marks on us over here, and I'm just we'll go ahead, Kara. You go and plug all your
I'm wearing his
many things
shirt right now, actually.
Oh yeah, you are.
Falcha.
Yeah, so I'm everyone's biggest fan. I mean, that's me. Sorry. I'm Kara. And you can find me on Twitter at Kara DiDemizio, or alternately, I also run a page called Time Travel Talks. And the concept is, if you already haven't gotten annoyed of me pimping in other episodes, is fucking bringing history and making it engaging and making it exciting for people of all levels of knowledge. And we're doing this by generating conversation in Twitter, which in my opinion is a very accessible for all ages, for a lot of folks of different backgrounds to be able to see and learn things. And 2021, we have a lot of plans. I know we'll be doing a history of alcohol chat. I know we'll be doing some music chats. Revolutions is possibly in the works. But right now they're Twitter chats. There's a lot more to come on that. And Autumn, if you don't, please get involved, because we have people that are your age. We have people that are of all ages, of all walks of life, people that have gone to school, people that haven't gone to school. It's a no judgment zone. Like if you ask us a history question or want to talk about a history question, we will, if we don't have the answer, we will put a call out for somebody to be able to provide the answer. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. We want people to be comfortable talking to academics and vice versa. We want everyone to talk about history because, frankly, history is more fucking exciting than many stories are. So, that being said, you can follow Time Travel Talks on Twitter and Instagram at exactly that. And we do have a Facebook page. We're not particularly active on it yet. We still have to kind of find that use for it, if you will. And we would love, Autumn, you to become a member of that community. We have a Discord server. You may know what it is. Yes,
I'm in like so many Discords. My boyfriend makes fun of me.
Thank the good Lord. One less person, one less Luddite for me to have to like tell what Discord is.
And Discord is so simple.
It is. And the funny thing is, though, guys, it's seriously a concept of what chat rooms used to be, and it's kind of like MSN Messenger, but with less creeps, right? So it's in the way that we have it organized is people can share their content. We have a lot of subcategories, subchannels where you can post like your cute dogs, but you can also post archaeology finds, and it can coexist in this funny, really, really great group of individuals. So please, if you want that Discord link, hit me up on private messenger. We're trying to avoid bots and spam. So that's why I don't post it publicly. So yes, I will definitely shoot you a DM with it, and then you have to introduce yourself in there. It's the only obligation.
I got it. Don't worry.
Also, can I just point out, I just now got autumn leaf, by the way, for all of us. I just now fucking processed that.
Oh my God, Jessica, seriously.
Wait, what? Hold on, explain this to me.
I just understood it. I was like, what an odd Twitter handle, and then it hit me just now.
Having a light bulb moment. Why is it that I'm the only one that got it? Like, how is this?
The world is on fire. Oh, me and Jessica.
I just pulled the damn light bulb and got autumn leaf. I was just like, why the hell leaf? I mean, is she She really into leaves.
Is she a Korok from the Legend of Zelda games? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I'm going like there could be a million. Like, all right, she really digs
And
leaves. I'm
Bethany's
sure she
like,
has a lot of those wax covered ones. I'm sure, like I don't know what she's into. And then it clicked. Autumn leaf. God Almighty, I feel so stupid. I had to share it. So like the moment.
Bethany and I are like, what?
I'm the one that's going, oh my God, that's so cute. Like, I thought it was horrible.
I get it now. I'm following.
What? We got there in the end, folks. It's okay.
My brain is just ruined. It's had a cry. It needs
it needs therapy, like right now.
Oh, it desperately needs therapy. There are a lot of reasons, but that's like low on the list, actually. So, Bethany, where do people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Bethany Skeleton 5 as the number 5. And then on Twitter, you can also find me at Bethany Skeleton 5, but you make sure you capitalize the BS. Because I'm tag somebody else. But yeah, you can find me on there. And Jessica, what about you, girl?
Well, I'll plug myself in a minute, but let's go ahead and plug where you follow and find this podcast. I know that I keep like talking about how into Linktree I am because Kara is one of these young folk on the street that know all these tricks. So we've got that up everywhere, anywhere that you want to find us or anything that you want to listen to, we're everywhere, but it's all available now on our social media sites through Linktree. We're working on a brand new
website.
Thank you. God, I'm really behind. We're working on a brand new website. We'll have that up and running hopefully by this time next week. It won't be fancy pants yet, but we're going to get there. And that's going to include show notes. And God help me, I plan to even cite some of my sources, folks. So that's going to be I'm going to put them in there. We'll have books we love. We'll put up little caveats for books that we read and also love and dig and get into. So that website, and it will still be bodycounthistorypod.com. You can follow us at bodycountpod on Twitter, Instagram, and now Facebook. We've joined the world of social media that we all avoid because our families are on it. Yeah, they haven't quite discovered Instagram and Twitter yet, but we are on Facebook. You can follow us there. We're trying to get active and trying to be into that world as well. That being said, you can follow me at Jessica B as in Bravo Manor, spelled like the house, not the behavior. Jessica B Manor on Twitter and Instagram. And Autumn, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I'm super excited. I think you're going to shame a lot of people with this episode with your age and
knowledge.
I hope I break a lot of stereotypes.
Oh, you already did, girl. Yes, girl.
Crushed it. Crushed it. It was such a joy. Again, I knew I was going to cry. I didn't think I'd be this happy about being like a huge tit.
Reach out to your World War II friend because I'm telling you.
I will.
Let's make it happen. Even if it's Zoom, even if we have to go rogue and go on Zoom.
Yeah, we can go rogue every once in a while. We can off-road.
I mean, girls got to go bad sometimes. So,
if anything, it's for 94th Infantry or what Armored Division, right?
Yeah, 12. Well, he's 94, 12th Armored Division. But yes, the 94th Infantry Division. I know about them too. Oh no!
Damn.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah.
So this has been a great episode. We were so excited. Thank you so much. That's going to wrap it up for this one. It'll probably be a two-parter. So everybody.
Yeah.
Get on the train with Autumn Leaf. Despite how clever that is, I was a little too stupid to enjoy it.
Apparently,
so we will be. Yeah. Okay. Like it didn't hit me. I was like, all right, whatever. The foul leaves. All right. Like I'm down to clown. So we will be back with you guys soon. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.